The king is coming to town. Liberal MP praises online news act while spending millions on Meta. Mum's the word on the COVID response. Feds downplayed the BC drug policy failure. More people fall below the poverty line in Canada. Alberta and Saskatchewan says the people will decide. Conservative housing plan was way better. All that and more on our Friday edition of The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. On the phone with me, Iain Burns, all the way out there in our nation's capital. Beautiful day in the Okanagan. We're over the 10 mark here this morning. It's 12 degrees already this morning in the sunny Okanagan, and it is a sunny day, clear blue skies, and our live shot there, traffic moving nicely. How are things out there in the nation's capital?
It's cloudy, a bit blustery, and I think it's about 16 degrees, so it's all right. Could be worse.
Sounds like our political climate. Cloudy and blustery.
Well, and also maybe could be worse. That's also probably true, I would say.
Just wait an hour, just like the weather, right? Just wait an hour.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know. You never know. Hey, your boss is coming to town. He's looking for you. King
he's
Charles.
your boss as well, mate. Don't forget.
King Charles to deliver the throne speech in Canada, and Carney to meet Trump next week. There you go.
He's only the second monarch to have done this. The only other one is his mother, and she did it twice in 1957 and 1977. So it's very consequential, and it's quite obviously a rebuke of Donald Trump and questions about Canada's sovereignty and all the rest of it. King Charles is a bit of a sort of he is a liberal, basically, I'd say, like with a small L. And probably would vote Liberal if he could. I don't know. I don't think he has that ability. But he's obviously furious. He would never say such a thing, but he gestures in certain ways. Like a couple of months ago, whenever it was, where he wore those medals. They were all Canadian medals. They do look sad little things like that in the monarchy because they're forbidden from expressing their opinion in any sort of official way, so they just wear clothes, and like the Queen used to do that. The Queen would like wear blue and yellow to express, how positivity about the European Union or something like that. But anyway, I mean, he's going to come over and he's going to help his buddy Mark Carney, and you can imagine when he announced this, one of the first questions was in French, and you can imagine what it was to Mark Carney, which is like, do you think this is a good idea when people in Quebec hate the king? So, in so many words. And he repeated what he said when he became prime minister the first time, which is this country was founded by the English, the French, and the First Nations. And, that's how it's always worked. And the king is the ultimate head of state. So shut up, basically, is what he said. But he also said, in other news, that he's going to go down and meet Trump in DC next Tuesday. So that is obviously going to be, I would assume, a sort of bonanza for the press and for people that like memes and all the rest of it. There'll be lots of funny, weird stuff goes on down there in Washington.
Maybe we'll get ourselves a handshake meme. He's also laid out the priorities, and that's achieving a free trade deal by July 1st alongside a tax cut that will benefit the middle class. And he also insisted that he will not enter into a formal pact with the NDP to give himself a majority in government. They lost one seat yesterday, down to 168. That that Bloc seat flipped back.
Yeah, Telbon. That was an interesting thing, actually, because he was you don't usually get this from politicians, and Mark Carney very much is a politician, but he's not your traditional politician. But he was just asked, will you are you trying to get into some sort of formal deal with the NDP? And he responded just saying no. And then he was asked why not, and he just said why. So it's kind of he does that sometimes with his short responses. But he just said no. So I think he's I must admit, I don't really know what it is that he's thinking. I guess he just wants to do it on a vote by vote basis or something like that, because I suppose he expects that that the NDP is basically going to support everything he does anyway. The first big message that he sent out to Canada was that he was going to expand dental care, which is obviously an olive branch to the NDP. That's obviously that's to try and get them on side. But he also said he was also quite sort of nice, I guess you could say, or respectful or honourable, whatever you want to say, about the Conservatives. And he said quite simply, like, I'm not going to play any games with Pierre Poilievre. And if the Conservatives want to try and get him in Parliament in a by-election, I'll do it right away. I'll do it straight away. I'm not going to mess around. Because obviously, there's this ridiculous situation where the Prime Minister can decide to delay that by as long as he wants. It's such a stupid thing, or by as long as 6 months, I think. Absolutely ridiculous that he has that power. But he just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll get him in right away. And then he said, he tried to sort of make it seem like it was like a wartime government that he was in charge of, and maybe that's his strategy in terms of like getting laws passed. He sort of said like, this is not an ordinary time, and I understand that not everybody voted for the Liberals, but all the parties have to work together. And he said he's been chatting to all of them. He's chatted to the Bloc and he's chatted to the Tories, obviously. And he said he wants everybody to work together to get out of this this dangerous spot that we're in with the Americans. So I mean, it's very much the honeymoon period, isn't it? It's his first proper press conference. Well, it's his first press conference, isn't it, since he was elected? Um, he hasn't actually started the fights yet, has he? The arguments haven't really begun yet, so he's afforded the luxury of talking about unity and being all nice and all the rest of it. But I don't know. I suppose overall, it's probably what Canadians wanted to hear, I think.
Yeah, and there is a lot of talk on the internet, and a lot of pundits are talking about him trying to convince NDP to cross over as well, though. But now there needs one more of those, though, too, to actually make it work. It was not so bad when it was a couple, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could still happen, but that would be the end of that party, wouldn't it? And
Yeah.
that would be a big deal for the NDP. It would be quite a momentous thing to do, and to be responsible for that. I don't know if they would be willing, the people in the Commons, I don't know if they would be willing to be, the executioner of the NDP, because that's quite a big thing to do. But I guess we'll see. I mean, another thing that I noticed about that press conference, which I was watching the CBC analysis just now, and they were quite impressed, though they did say that it sounded like the Conservative Party's platform. The Cochrane fella said that, which I agree with, is quite accurate, because he talked about housing right away, right off the bat. It was housing, the economy. He even mentioned bail. He said we got to make sure that people can't get out on bail and commit crimes, and it was very much like the Conservatives. But what intrigued me was when the journalists were offered an opportunity to ask questions, and it was just all about Trump, pretty much. About 50% of them were French, which is just completely absurd. I always find that absurd at the press conferences. This minority of people in Canada sometimes has an actual majority of the questions at these press conferences. Just complete madness, completely unfair and unbalanced, but whatever. But not a single one of them asked about natural resources, oil and gas, the LNG, the big questions, or farming, canola and all the rest of it. The really big questions for the West. Not a single journalist asked a question about that, and that to me is an indictment, really, of that little bubble of people that
the West gets
live in Ottawa.
Gets very little representation, including in the media. And that's just
Indeed, because the media are all out there. The media are all out there. They're all here where I am. They're all in Ottawa, and they're all pretty much from around here as well, or they've been they've acclimatized to this area, and they're questions, loads and loads of questions about Quebec, trivial, stupid questions about Quebec, but not a single question about the West. I mean, it's disappointing, I would say.
We're going to try again to get you accredited to get into that parliamentary gaggle or whatever they call it. So, because you are there, so we'll see if they have a new leaf turned over here instead of keeping certain people out. There you go.
Well, it's not up to. That's actually run by a separate little organization, the Parliamentary Press Gallery, and they're the ones that make that determination. Again, fundamentally undemocratic, just ridiculous situation that this set of self-appointed bigwigs get to decide who's allowed to ask questions in Parliament. Just one of those things that if I tried to if somebody was completely unaware of this and I tried to explain it to them, they would think I was talking about China or something like that. They'd think I was talking about a completely closed off country, but it's Canada. And if you're wondering, by the way, why Rebel and those other people, um, I can't even remember the names of them, but those other media outlets. If you're wondering why they kind of like jump Mark Carney in the street or Justin Trudeau in the street, that's why, because they can't get into the press gallery. So the only way that they can ever ask questions is by ambushing.
Yeah. So Stephen Guilbeault put out a tweet there, strengthening Canadian journalism about keeping Canada strong. He's bragging about the Online News Act ensures that big tech companies pay their fair share. Well, that's not true. The Meta is not paying anything, and they said they would boycott Meta, and then the Liberals and the Liberal government spent millions of dollars since January for this election, and federal departments have spent millions of dollars advertising their programs, and that this is the hypocrisy at like at an extreme level. And here he is bragging about it again.
It's also false. He uses a plural there. Big tech companies. There's only one company, and it's Google. Yeah. Facebook doesn't. Instead, they decided to pull news from Canada, and that's don't take our word for it. Read the New York Times. Read their hysterical article that they wrote about it and how the right wing is taking over social media because of this. But I mean, this is just Guilbeault in a nutshell, isn't it? It's like he finds the most controversial aspect of the government that he's a part of, and he just keeps on pushing the buttons, doesn't he? Keeps on. He's like a troll, and he just keeps going and going and going. He's like Mark Carney would be wise to consider whether it's worth having him in his government, because he might energize his own team, but he's a real lightning rod for everybody else, basically, and he's shown now he's been taken off the environment file, but now that he's with the media, he's just going to bring the same. He's going to bring the same attitude, isn't he? And it's just I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if it's worth it for the Liberals to suffer that.
Strengthening Canadian journalism. Close to 100 outlets have failed since the introduction of the Online News Act. We've done tons and tons of stories on it. Tons of academics have also said that it's killing local journalism. And we even did the interviews here Kent Mulgat was the moderator at the Kelowna Chamber, and that was Stephen Fuhr said it needs to go, as did, he's now the MP, said it needs to go. So did Juliette Sicot, the Liberal candidate. So did the Conservatives. They've been saying it for a while. They actually said they would repeal Bill C-18 and the Online News Act. And the NDP also said it needs to go. But here's Guilbeault, again, the guy that's actually in charge of the media, promoting this failed policy that is actually devastating local media across Canada. All outlets, including the CBC and CTV, have lost half their traffic and half their revenues because of this Online News Act. And the Liberal government itself, the Privy Council, said that the Liberal government had no choice but to go back and start advertising on Meta because they recognize that Canadians get their news on that platform, and the only way to get it on there is to pay them millions of dollars.
Yeah, and when I was looking through the ad page, like the ad database that Facebook publishes, one of the top spenders was the Globe and Mail newspaper. So the Globe and Mail, which basically never talks about the Online News Act or what tragedy it's been, they're giving money to Facebook just so that they can post their stories on Facebook. It's like, what a desperate situation.
The government gives them money,
but that still doesn't motivate them to say anything really, or not much about it.
So the government gives them money, and in turn they give the money back to Meta.
Yeah, and this sort of quite obvious hypocrisy. For a journalist, this is very, very low-hanging fruit. You don't really even have to do that much thinking. It's just like right in front of you. It's like, oh, okay, here's people in power being exceedingly hypocritical. That's basically why journalism exists, is to point a finger at people like that. And yet, barely anybody cares. No, and nobody in the mainstream press really wants to talk about it.
Yeah, here's another thing that they don't want to talk about. They actually says you have to sign a document and say you're never going to talk about it. And that's no embarrassment, Tam told Chief Public Health Officer Teresa Tam, Dr. Tam, were required to sign a secret oath promising never to divulge information that may result in embarrassment for cabinet. There you go, according to an access to information document. This is a wholly owned Blacklock story. And quite a few were required to sign the pledge. There you go. So how will we ever find out now without getting, a conservative government elected? We'll probably never find out about this stuff. It'll get buried for so long, nobody will ever even want to ask about it anymore.
I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I feel like the neutral civil service of a country, especially a democratic country like Canada, has no business whatsoever signing any bloody oath. What the hell was she thinking? Why would you do that? It's just as usual with Blacklocks, they find stuff that just makes you want to sort of smash your head against the wall.
The Department of Health at the height of the pandemic signed $8 billion of vaccine contracts with 7 manufacturers: AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Medico, Moderna, Novavax, Pfizer, and Sanofi. And a lot of these contracts, nothing was ever produced out of these contracts other than transfer of money.
Yeah, I was going to say, other than certain generational fortunes, they were produced, weren't they? There'll be some people that for literally 3, 4, maybe more generations will live in splendor and vast wealth because of this.
So the Trudeau Liberals ran on accountability and transparency, and then they added a thing after they were elected. They put the no in front of it, and that was kind of their platform. And here you go. They actually asked people to sign these documents to make sure that there was no accountability or transparency.
Yep, and I just feel like even among people that are upset about this sort of thing, there's not even that much appetite to go into it, is there? It's like we're sort of collectively in denial, I think, about all this, which makes it harder to discuss.
And here's another one with Holly Doan and ferreted out there. Memo admitted drug failure. And this ties to British Columbia. The health department in its last memo to then addictions minister Yair Sachs cautioned that changing laws is alone not sufficient to reduce drug overdose. The December 17th memo came nearly 2 years after Cabinet changed federal law to decriminalize personal possession of narcotics in BC. If pressed on lessons learned from BC, so far changing laws alone is not sufficient. There you go. The department downplayed failure of the 15-month experiment in British Columbia. As the first exemption of its kind in Canada, there's always an understanding that adjustments would need to be made along the way.
Yeah.
Sachs was fired from cabinet weeks later. There you go.
And she lost her seat as well just now in the election.
Overdose
but I
deaths.
don't know. I mean, we are ruled by not particularly wise and gifted people. That's the truth. We're ruled by, and I'm sorry to say it, and I really wish this wasn't the case, but we're ruled by pretty mediocre people. And now and then we get to see it very clearly. This is one example, I think, of just how low grade these people actually are. And it's really frightening, isn't it? It's kind of like one of those moments where you're on a plane or something and you hit turbulence and you start to really hope that the pilot's good and knows what he's doing. We're in a situation like that in terms of the governance of this country, but I have to confess, I don't think we have a very good pilot or staff. They're all pretty clueless. And it's kind of terrifying, actually.
One of the real tests for the Carney government will be, and if we can get you there to ask the questions, is will you actually be held accountable and disclose, including like the green slush fund, like those documents that were asked for? Because in this one too, overdose deaths in the 15-month trial period, a total of 3313 compared to 2843 in the 15 months prior. That's an increase of 16.5% with this decriminalization.
Yeah, and it's not like they were experimenting with something and they were way out on their own, and it was like, okay, we have no idea, guys. We've just got to try something. Let's see what happens. It wasn't like that at all. It was they suggested doing this, and pretty much everybody with common sense said, nah, don't do that. That's stupid. But they did it anyway.
And here's another Holly Doan Black Luck story, and I suggest people subscribe. It's about $300 a year to go, and she doesn't take any government money, and they basically dig through documents. That's their main function. They dig through documents and find the hypocrisy and the stuff that you need to know about. Well worth the money to go and support such a great independent journalism as Blacklock's. And here, poverty rate up for the 4th year in a row and about to go much higher. There you go. That's a tough one, right? The national poverty rate is up for the 4th consecutive year to 10.2%. That's a horrible statistic for a country that should be wealthy beyond like anybody's expectations. Canada should be one of the wealthiest nations in the world, and every Canadian citizen should partake in that. And that's all the stuff that's beneath our feet. And yet we continue to suppress that. And like you said, no journalist even asked at the scrum. They are asking about Trump. That's all they asked about. Approximately 4 million Canadians live below the poverty line. And my wife was out there just recently going door to door. And she said some of the, even Kelowna, when you open the doors and you look inside the homes, she was in tears of what she saw. So there you go.
Yeah, but I mean, talking about our glorious elite that just seems to know exactly what to do in all situations. Look what they did in 2019 there. They passed a Poverty Reduction Act. So obviously, you know, if you've got a problem like poverty, just pass an act. That'll fix it, won't it? That's what our geniuses in Parliament have told us. But unfortunately, that didn't work. I don't know why. Maybe that was Trump's fault. I can't think of another reason.
I think it was Joe Biden, and it was the Inflation Reduction Act, right? They just reuse those terms all the time.
Yeah, but it's also just this notion that, you know, you can just pass a law and that'll sort whatever it is out. Whatever the problem is, that'll sort it. Yeah, just pass a law. Like, it's obviously vastly more complicated than that, isn't it? It's not just. And the same is true of, but I mean, that Inflation Reduction Act was an absolute joke anyway. It didn't have anything to do with that. It increased inflation. It was it was the Green New Deal, wasn't it? That's what that really was. But yeah, it just disappoints me that we have such low grade people in charge of our lives, and they're so small in ambition and intellect, and it genuinely breaks my heart.
Yeah, no, it's like horrible, actually horrible that a country as rich as Canada. Yeah. And in here, just that even it's so bad. McDonald's store traffic falls unexpectedly as diners grow uneasy about the economy. Even your friend McDonald's.
To be honest, like they charge a pretty penny for their, you know, barely edible food. No, it's actually I disagree with myself there. I find it to be delectable, but you know, it's not exactly a gourmet meal, is it? And they've got this mass production system. You'd think that they could knock out burgers for less than what they do, but I guess they've moved up in terms of price, haven't they? They're in a new bracket now, McDonald's. So I'm not surprised that they've lost yet more diners.
And they did say that they were going to try and bring that down. But, you know, it's bad when people are stopping shopping at places like that, because it's typically like cheaper food and not good for you food, though, but cheaper. But it just shows
that was always the point, wasn't it? That was the offer. I always thought. I always associate McDonald's with, like, yeah, you can get a cheap meal and it'll be very sort of salty and tasty. But yeah, it's not really like, I don't think it's like that anymore. It's more of a, you know, it's becoming more like other takeout food, isn't it? Like, in terms of price.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, my advice to people is try not to eat this stuff that's not good for you. It's not good for your health. It's not good for a lot of reasons. But it is convenient, and I do eat it every now and then when I'm on the road, especially. And I will go to McDonald's because at least you kind of know what you're going to get, right? Like, it is pretty consistent. I mean, that they have going for them. It's consistent, right? And their coffee's not bad.
Look, I don't like the coffee, I must say. I've always had that argument with people. But a little bit of breaking news now that I can give to our listeners. If you're lucky enough to be listening, you're going to learn this ahead of everyone else. That Damien Curek, who is a Battle Rivers Conservative MP, which is in Alberta, is going to resign, and that's where Poilievre is going to run. So Pierre Poilievre is going to be an Alberta MP very soon.
Battle River, where's Battle River? Is that in the south, isn't it? Battle River?
Battle River Crowfoot. Let's take a look and see
I
where
think
that
that's
is.
south of Calgary, no?
It's right. It's east of Calgary, I think. Here.
Southeast though, kind of thing.
Let me see. No, it just looks like it's a huge one. It's obviously a massively rural one. It's kind of like it's to the east of both Edmonton and Calgary, and it goes all the way up between those two cities, but on the east side.
There you go.
Very,
there you go. You
very
got breaking
interesting.
news.
I mean,
Pierre
well, it's
Poilievre.
interesting because that's his whole life. He's been living in Ottawa since he was a kid, really, since he was like 22 or something like that.
Well,
That's a
he is
big deal. So he's going to have to shift his whole life, his family, and everything there. But I did have a feeling he would go to Alberta, to be honest.
He is an Alberta boy. Lived in Calgary, grew up in Calgary. So there you go. Talking about rural crime rates consistently higher than in urban centers. According to StatsCan, crime rates in rural communities consistently higher than urban centers suggests new data from StatsCan, and it's a long-term trend one, a criminologist says. It's surprising. There you go. Not surprising.
Well, but yeah, this criminologist says, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
And then he says, people often have this misunderstanding that more people mean higher crime rates, which is just not true. But I mean, instinctively, you do think that's true, don't you? I mean, I've seen so much more crime, but I guess that's it, isn't it? You bias your own perspectives of what you see yourself. And in cities, I've seen loads of crime, but I don't think I've ever seen crime anywhere in the world in a rural area.
Well, I mean, it doesn't publicize as much. Like if something happens in a rural community, it doesn't really get a lot of attention unless it's a major, like a multiple murder or something like that. But it just doesn't get a lot of the there's not a lot of people there with social media. Like if something happens in a Toronto bus station or something like that, when it's on like all over social media and that. So it definitely gets a lot more exposure in bigger cities.
Yeah, I guess that's right. And then also, all these things have to ultimately, they're per capita. That's the only way to understand anything like this, really. And because when you're in a city, sometimes it's like somewhere like Toronto, it's like 5, 6, 7 million people or whatever. There's so many more people that the per capita rates come right down, even if there is, in an absolute sense, there is a lot of crime. But by like per head, it's not actually that much.
Yeah, we've got somebody asking about the separation movement that's happening in Alberta and Saskatchewan here. Scott Moe says he's a Canadian but wouldn't stop the vote on Saskatchewan separating from Canada. He said he's a true Canadian, but he definitely wouldn't stop the vote. And residents are allowed to trigger provincial legislation for a plebiscite on the issue. And why would you condemn Saskatchewan people that might have an opinion? There you go. But
I'm not about condemning people.
The opposition NDP leader Carla Beck is wanting Moe to condemn these people. She accused the Saskatchewan Party of pandering to separatist sentiments following Mark Carney's election win. Yeah. There you go. And they're using the similar language. It's reckless. And there you go. The NDP, I mean,
it's a tricky one, that, for Moe, isn't it? Because he doesn't want to do that, but he also doesn't want to alienate people in Saskatchewan. So I think he's trying to play it cool, isn't he?
After what the NDP did to Canada for the past 4 years, and what the NDP did to themselves during this election, maybe they should just take a seat for a while and just like figure out who they are and what they represent. Because I don't even think they know.
They need to go to a camp for a few months so that they can figure each other out.
They need to figure out who they are and see if they can pick a leader that isn't an irrational person.
It's a very interesting. Raises an interesting point though. Like, who is going to be their leader? Because it's kind of last chance saloon for the NDP now. They can't mess around. They've got to pick someone.
I tell you, Jack
that's going to turn the ship around.
Both the late Jack Layton and my dad, who was a staunch supporter of the NDP, would be rolling around in their graves wondering, what did Jagmeet Singh do to the NDP?
Yeah, well, he turned it into something. He sort of made it into a new party almost, didn't he? Much more similar to the left wing of the Democratic Party in the US, and very American actually. It's ironic that he was on his high horse about America, because I look at him and he's like a creature of the United States, Jagmeet Singh. Like he's very much like an American,
I don't think
like
he's allowed.
left-wing Democratic politician, sort of like Alexandria, whatever her name is,
Cortez,
Ocasio-Cortez.
AOC. Yeah.
Yeah,
AOC.
he reminds me of her and some of her acolytes and assistants in the Congress.
I
So
think that
I think he introduced something that's alien to probably most Canadians, and got pushed out as a consequence.
I don't think he can go and even join AOC or Bernie Sanders in the U.S. because Kash Patel, the FBI director, said that he would pick him up if he makes his way over to the United States.
Yeah, and certainly the Indians want him as well, don't they?
He might actually find himself on a plane to a different country. There you go. And this is, again, here's the Albertan part of it. This is from the Calgary Herald. This is an opinion piece as well. Albertans will get to vote on independence, and it was bet on it, baby. So there you go. There's your answer. The person asking on TikTok, that there's a lot of people out there that are actually expressing their, and again, I guess the frustration is like you said, not one person asked about the greatest Canadian asset, about our oil and gas and our LNG in that press conference. Why is that question not being asked? Why is that question?
Yeah, because it doesn't. It's just not a factor in their lives. It's not something that they think about. I mean, in the East here, Quebec, Ontario, everybody has hydro, really. It's like very, very blessed with hydro, much like BC is. So it's not even something that people think about. And then, like gas stations, you would think that they would put two and two together and think, like, in some way, there's a chance that this came from Alberta, even if it did come through the US. But it just doesn't it doesn't figure in their minds. It's not just like canola, to an even greater extent. Like the cash crops of the prairies of Saskatchewan. I mean, that could not be further from the minds of people in Eastern Canada. They don't give a toss, as they say, where I'm from.
Well, there you go. But a lot of people taking the move to the United States in their own hands. More Canadians searching how to move to the U.S. after this week's federal election results. So that's from BlogTO. Those are the people that bought Daily Hive.
Yeah, I guess they've just done this based on Google Trends, have they? It's a very easy story to write. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I suppose it is
that's
still
the same thing
quite intriguing.
When Trump won, I know there's this exodus back and forth, right? When Trump won, there's all these searches to move to Canada. Maybe they just do that.
And yet
movie.
It never happens.
Movie trading places, right? They can just trade lives.
Yeah. Well, Carney mentioned, interestingly, during his press conference just now, he mentioned Canadians overseas, and he was saying, I really hope that you look at what we're doing here, and you feel you feel the urge to come back home, which I find that's such a peculiar thing. I mean, for starters, I don't think the Canadian diaspora is that large anyway, really, is it? I mean, I know a lot of professionals go to the US.
I think the better question.
I've known a lot of Canadians in the UK, where I met my wife, and many Canadians in the UK. But I just feel like it's not that big, is it? It's not that big of a number. And also, that's the kind of thing that you hear out of a country like India or Mexico. So, like, usually a poorer country will say something like that, like, "Please come home." It's a very odd thing to say.
If you were standing there after he said that, you can change that slide there, Rommel, to the next one. If you were standing there, wouldn't the next question out of your mouth be to the Prime Minister, so does that mean you're going to pay the $5 billion in taxes that Brookfield dodged? And does that mean you're going to move the headquarters of Brookfield back to Canada? You're asking other people to do the same. Again, leadership is by example. So show us the way.
Tax dodging for me, but not for thee.
Show us the way. And then this is a CBC article. Western secession is all the rage. And there you go. This person you're getting lots of answers on that question there. How would an independent West fare economically?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, they don't really go into it in that much detail, and I don't think it's very serious either, because you go down there and they start talking about the whole West, including BC,
Mm-hmm.
and then they say, yeah, it wouldn't have that much of an opportunity, or it wouldn't fare as well as an independent Quebec, because obviously Quebec's got the St. Lawrence, and I was just thinking, I think I would rather have the Pacific Ocean than the
Yeah.
St. Lawrence, you know.
I,
But what intrigued me was that it contained remarks by Trevor Toombe, who was belittled and dismissed by Mark Carney not so long ago, and he was coming out and saying something that is, it sounds superficially like it could be right, but I'm not sure about it. But he was saying, in the same way that people fled Montreal and Quebec in general when they started to go mad about separation, he was saying that might also happen to Alberta. They might lose taxpayers and lose capital because they'll flee. But I'm not so sure about that, because Quebec, there are lots of reasons that happened in Quebec, and also Quebec doesn't have anything unique in Canada really, whereas Alberta really does. Like the oil, that's completely unique in terms of its quantity. It's the only part of Canada that has that sort of oil, you know,
I would think
that
that.
sort of capacity of
I
oil.
mean,
So obvious, like, why would they flee? That's where the oil is, you know.
I would think two things that might go against what Trevor Toombs is saying. I think there'll be a lot of people moving to Alberta to try and stop it so that they can vote, and there'll be a lot of people moving there to try and make it go. Do you know what I mean? But I think that you're going to see a natural influx into Alberta, and I think that's happening anyway, because Alberta is a thriving economy. It is one of the Canada's thriving economies. And for a number of reasons, even the tech sector is doing well there. Forestry sector is doing well. The oil and gas sector, all those sectors are doing well. In Alberta, and it's cheaper. The housing is cheaper. The cost is cheaper. There's no provincial sales tax. They're getting a big tax break. I mean, it's just what they do have though. And I've lived in Alberta for 15 years. They got a little thing called snow and cold weather.
And hailstones the size of meteorites.
Hail the size of softballs, and so you got to have indestructible cars if you want to live there. Cyber trucks or something you got to have if you want to live in Alberta.
But I'd say definitely, like, the tax regime is looked upon with a lot of fondness, isn't it, by investors and employees as well. Like, people like the idea of that tax regime.
I mean, it's like, for instance, on a view, like even like an SUV, like a higher end SUV, between British Columbia and like a Cadillac SUV, and then when I went to the auto show, I think it's $36,000 difference between buying that exact same vehicle in British Columbia as buying it in Alberta. $36,000 difference.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge, isn't it?
That's
They
all
also
taxes.
have a higher average income as well, don't they, in Alberta? So it's like they've got more money, and then things are cheaper, or some things are cheaper anyway.
No sales tax when you go to register a used car. Like if you can't afford a new car, lots of people go out and buy a used car. But in British Columbia and in Ontario, when you register a used car, the tax man there wants to tax something that's already been taxed. They tax it at a high rate too. In British Columbia, the tax rate, because there's no GST, like federal tax on used cars, but in BC, they start the tax rate for used vehicles, and it's tiered. They start it at 12%, and it's the similar thing in your province of Ontario. The tax man will actually, if you buy and sell that vehicle probably like 5 or 6 times, that vehicle will have generated more tax than the cost in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, the tax man cometh again and again and again, doesn't he?
Yeah, the tax man knows how to take it. Yeah, for sure. I mean,
and that's why, talking about Britain as we do from time to time, that's why the inheritance tax in Britain drives people absolutely mad, because they've paid tax on things, in some cases, many, many, many times, income, VAT or whatever, and then again and again, like you've said, for like cars. And then they have the misfortune of dying, and then the government's like, all right, well, I'll tax everything that you've accumulated over your whole life, and I'll just get my hands in there again. I mean, you can see why that drives people mad, and why I rather hope that
Well,
the Liberals don't try that here because I think
well,
it will infuriate people.
That does not apply to the extremely wealthy because they use tax havens. Just ask Mr. Carney about that. And trust funds like Justin Trudeau, that's how they escape it. So it's only the people that want to pass something on to their children that get punished in the UK. Kelowna developer asks, why is federal government making housing so expensive? This is a story that was done by Steve McNall, and he talked to Renee Merrifield, and he compared the two platforms, the housing platform promoted by the Prime Minister Mark Carney and the one promoted by the Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. And we did that comparison as well. Definitely the one for the Conservative one put a lot more money into the pockets of the taxpayer, and the Liberal one put a lot more money into the corporations that will be getting access to cheap financing and ample financing for modular home building, but very little in the way of for the actual taxpayer, because theirs was $1 million, the GST off $1 million homes for first-time home buyers. And it's been statistically laid out that that's a very small fraction of people that first-time home buyers typically don't buy new homes.
Yeah, well, I mean, we did a video just on that, didn't we? And I think basically what we discussed remains accurate and true. Although you never know, really. I mean, Mark Carney might improvise a bit more with his plan. Who knows? He seems to be quite fond of a lot of the Conservative ideas, and he's in a pretty safe spot now where he can pilfer some more ideas. So let's see, maybe he'll take some.
Well, I mean, I think it would be great if he did pilfer some ideas, because the Conservative platform had lots of great ideas, like the top-up of the TFSA, which is great for the taxpayer. There was a lot of taxpayer-type initiatives that was in the Conservative plan, and a lot of the plan in the Liberal plan was a lot geared towards corporations. So maybe a little balancing act in taking some of the stuff, and maybe he will work with the Conservatives and put some of those into place, because a lot of them made a lot of sense for the taxpayer.
Definitely that one about how you can invest in Canadian companies, like when you sell your an asset or whatever.
The one
that one I've heard a number of Liberals, and I'm fairly sure Michael Ignatieff as well might be one of them. I can't remember exactly, but I think in that interview he also pointed to that particular policy. But he's not the only one. I've heard a load of people say that's a really good idea. And, you know, Carney, he likes to say that he's a pragmatist, doesn't he? So if he likes it, then maybe he'll be pragmatic and use that.
And that is the case. I mean, that one, as you and I pointed out, that it is literally rocket fuel. And I mean, that is one that he should look at adopting. And, you know, if they get a chance to do it, that would be great.
Well, the Tories, you know, one would assume that the Tories would vote for that in Parliament. So he's got a guaranteed path to getting that enacted, hasn't he?
I know, it makes sense. I mean, there were some good things in the plan there. So if you want to do good for the Canadian people, then just take some of the good stuff out of there.
Indeed.
And there you go. And then this is just a picture from 6Buzz TV. That's like an Ontario publication there, right? They just put up this thing that Kitchener Landlord and Tenant Board refuses to evict tenant despite landlord showing $30,000 in damages.
The Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board is infamous for stuff like this. And landlords in Ontario, I mean, the same is kind of true in BC as well, isn't it? But in Ontario, they are so like paranoid when it comes to actually renting out their properties. Because, I mean, that's even if you can get your case heard. It takes ages anyway to get it heard, which obviously favors the tenant, doesn't it? But also, you know, traditionally, the tenant seems to get off better in these cases.
Yeah. Sorry, I was reading a question there. I got lost there for a second. We got a clip here from Danielle Smith.
Large canola industry in their provinces, and that is regardless of political stripe, have raised it directly with the Prime Minister. It seems like it's a bit of a phony war. We've got a 100% tax on EV vehicles from China that's no one's buying in order to protect an EV industry in Ontario that doesn't exist. And in return, we are seeing punishment on pork and canola in our western provinces, which are products people do want. So I think the Chinese have been very targeted and direct in how they're trying to split our country up. And I think we need to revisit that. We obviously are going to have to find new markets for our products, but let's at least engage in proportionate responses rather than having a knee-jerk reaction that is only going to hurt our industries further. And that has been conveyed by myself as well as other premiers directly to the Prime Minister.
Yeah, there has been like almost radio silence on the canola problem with the Chinese tariffs. Like nothing really on the Chinese tariffs at all. It's just really got no attention.
Canola conspiracy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just like there's no attention at all on the canola thing, which will hurt a lot of farmers. And it's a tough market to get people to buy canola. Do you know what I mean? Like, and in the auto market, there's a lot of screaming about protecting. Again, we're going to talk about it later, and there's some really key points in there. Talk about protecting the Canadian auto market, which there is no really Canadian auto market, and if they don't drop that EV mandate, there will be no Canadian auto market. Somebody on TikTok keeps asking questions. D1 there, saying that Conservatives love to put money in the pockets of billionaires. I would advise D1 to go read both platforms. Go read both platforms. You and I and Renee did a breakdown of both platforms, and go read them and try to understand them both, and see if you still have that response. Go read them though, like actually read through them with an open mind, and then see which one favors billionaires and which one favors the taxpayer. And then I think you'll be surprised at what you say there. There's been a 38 oil patch leaders signed a letter to Mark Carney asking that they unleash the beast, as many have said, and the energy beast. Again, most Canadians don't realize that the oil and gas that's being sold right now through the one pipeline into the U.S. is basically at a discount. Western Canadian Select sells at a discount because we really only have one customer. And the other pipelines that we were asked to make in order to build the Northern Gateway and the Eastern Pipeline would have given us access to other markets, and we don't have that. So that's why Western Canadian Select sells at a discount, and that's a fact as well. Go check it out.
I mean, they've got us over a barrel. They've got us over an oil barrel in another way as well, the Americans, haven't they? In that they have the refineries. They refine, I don't know if it's the majority, but certainly like a huge amount of that oil. They refine it, don't they? In Texas, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So it's kind of like that the oil sands are useless unless you can refine it. I mean, it's like kind of obvious, isn't it? So when your number one client also has, basically a monopoly on turning your product into something useful, they also have power over you, don't they?
And just on the comments, like we're more than willing to respond to comments, but I mean, we'll take them a lot more serious if you actually put your name there, right? If you put, like fake names like X and D1 and that stuff, it's hard to take you serious, right? Like if we look at our YouTube watchers, I mean, at least they put their name there and they stand behind their comments. But if you're just going to spray comments out there, especially nonsense, I mean, why should anybody take it serious if you don't even put your name to it? There you go. Donald Trump with a Truth Social post. And I never go to Truth Social. Every now and then I see it pop up here, something like that. Many of our allies and friends celebrating May 8th as Victory Day. And he's claiming that we did more than any country by far in producing, of course, Donald Trump words, right? By producing a victorious result for World War II. And hereby renaming May 8th Victory Day as World War II and November 11th as Victory Day for World War I. We both won wars. We won both wars. Nobody's even close to us in terms of strength, bravery, and military brilliance. There you go. I know you're going to have lots to say on this. I know that your blood is boiling as you're listening to those words.
Look, I mean, by now, everybody should be used to American ignorance of the Second World War. I mean, I would say, the second half of the 20th century was basically American myth-making, trying to pretend that they won that war by themselves and excluding the Canadians and the British wherever they could. Like famously Saving Private Ryan, that's not the only one, but where an Anglo-Canadian operation, D-Day, was sort of reframed somehow as American heroics and Tom Hanks won the day. And Band of Brothers actually was similar. Like they've been pulling this off for ages now. even though the reality is that the Americans sat on their hands and didn't want to get into the war. And they only really came into it in 1942, when it had already been going on for 3 years. So, I mean, or 2.5 years. But, like, whatever. The Americans are allowed to have their delusions about the Second World War, I think, because it's like they've based their whole national identity on that lie and that myth, haven't they? But the one here that I find really interesting is the First World War, which that's like a touchy subject, because the British, French, and to a lesser extent the Russians won that war. The Americans had very little to do with winning the First World War, and obviously the Canadians, sorry, they were very much and the Australians, very much a big part of the First World War. But the Americans didn't join that war till 1917, and they came in. They did send a lot of soldiers, but I mean, no, I'm just not gonna. Like, I don't think anybody should accept that, and it's just the usual.
I think
it's kind of the usual American like fakery and myth making, but to a ridiculously crass extent, as you would expect from Trump.
And I think we should put Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in a room, and because they both claim the same thing. Vladimir Putin also says that Russian, like the Russian ego has been hurt because they won that war, and that they should be celebrating that. And the funny thing is again, not the funny thing, the odd thing is both the Americans have built the biggest military machine in the world, which they get to say that because they actually carry the big stick right now. And then the Russians would be the second biggest threat because just of its nuclear arsenal.
Yeah, you can't forget that. Yeah, I mean, that's the all-important weapon. That's the ultimate weapon of our age, isn't it?
They have the biggest nuclear arsenal. And then on a per capita basis, I believe that the Canadians gave more than anybody gave. And we also got some of the less than stellar probabilities of success jobs, like storming the beach in Normandy.
Well, not just that, but Vimy and Dieppe, loads of proper crap jobs were given to the Canadians.
Because they weren't at the decision desk, when and all the generals were there, the British and the Americans were there deciding who's going where, and then they just basically got assigned tasks, and just like, that's for you. But
yeah, well, the Aussies were also sent to Turkey, to Gallipoli, the Anzacs, and they, well, I think that also included New Zealand, didn't it? But they were sent there, and that was a really stupid operation to try and invade Turkey, and it was a massive failure. It was one of Winston Churchill's many, many failures, and that kind of gave birth to Australian nationalism and identity for that exact reason that you've mentioned, because they were told to do something stupid and basically go and die, and they weren't really part of the decision-making process.
Do you know when Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg were going to have a cage match?
Yeah, Elon bottled it, didn't he? Elon, it was a coward.
I think it should be Trump and Putin. They should have a cage match, and then that person can then determine who can claim the victory over the Second World War. So there you go. Germany's AfD classified as extreme right by domestic intelligence. Imagine that.
Well, dear me. I was going to say earlier on, when you're talking about the Second World War, yeah, the Russians, the Americans, they all sort of claim that they seized victory. But something that's never mentioned is one of the main protagonists in ensuring the defeat of Germany was Adolf Hitler, was the Germans themselves, because of how I was gonna use rich language there, because of how bloody stupid they were, how immensely stupid the Germans were in the Second World War. And then here we are in the next story, Germans being stupid, or the German elite, let's say. The German elite. I've said this a number of times, but it's got to that point where I just don't know what can be done for Germany. What can we do? We still haven't figured out the answer to the question that is Germany. What do we do about them? Because they don't understand democracy. They don't understand any ideological system that they get their claws into. They don't understand it, and they don't know how to do it. Look at this. This is insanity. And it's like, the Germans, they got a hold of nationalism in the late 19th century, and look where that got us. Then they got a hold of like anti-Semitism and racism and the idea of empire, and then they got Hitler. And then now in the post-Cold War phase, they've got hold of this like liberalism, this idea of a kind of left liberal kind of establishment. And they've gone in for things like mass immigration and multiculturalism and all the trendy left-wing ideas of the last 30 years. And they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to deal with it. So they've just gone and declared that the second largest party in Germany, the only party in Germany that rejects these ideas of the last 30 years, they've just said, you're now an extremist party. You're extreme right wing, and we now give ourselves permission to infiltrate your party with spies and do everything that we possibly can to destroy your party.
So,
It's just, will they ever learn? Will the Germans ever learn how to govern themselves? I mean, I know that's like quite harsh on Germans, and I've never met a German I didn't like. So this is nothing against the German people, but it's like they just don't know how to do it. They don't know how to have a government, and I feel like somebody in the late 1940s trying to figure out what to do with Germany in the aftermath of the Second World War. It's like that question still remains. What do we do with Germany?
I don't know the answer to that. But again, back to your motherland, Prince Harry. The England doesn't want to cover his security detail, so you can cover it yourself.
Yeah, because he infamously went off to California, decided he wasn't going to do any of the so-called work that the royal family is supposed to do to justify their luxurious existence and their lavish and comprehensive security detail. He said he wanted to go over to California, make hundreds of millions of dollars on garbage Netflix reality TV shows that nobody watches, and then he's come back and asked for that security detail back.
Can I cut you off there for a second and ask you this question? Is Prince Harry the new John Lennon?
Maybe if you take away all of the talent.
No, I'm just talking about like with Yoko Ono, like Meghan Markle. Like, do you know what I mean? Like John Lennon.
Maybe.
John Lennon was like, and I would argue one of the best musicians of all time, probably one of the most brilliant minds as far as music went. And then all of a sudden, Yoko Ono shows up on his doorstep there, and it just, I mean, some people have blamed it for the breakup of the Beatles, and also like he just went down that dark road, and then he ended up getting shot coming out of his apartment, which is a great loss for the world and his music genius. And then like some of the Beatles music actually gives me shivers. That Beatles music is timeless music. Like I mean, it's like it was a gift from somewhere that there's not a lot of other timeless musicians, is there?
No, definitely not. I mean, you kind of have to go back to the great composers, the great German composers like Beethoven and so on, to try and find something as timeless as that. I mean, some of the hymns and things like that, some old sort of Christian music, I think is pretty timeless as well. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the 20th century, John Lennon must be in at least the top 10 for songwriters, possibly top 5, I would say.
I would say if there's aliens amongst us, John Lennon was one of them.
Well, the thing is with him and Yoko, it's funny actually. The similarities are actually pretty strong between Harry and John Lennon, because John Lennon's mother was killed when he was young. She was killed. She was knocked over by a off-duty cop who killed her in a traffic accident. And I think he was about a similar age to when Diana also died in a car. Diana being Harry's mother, obviously, if anybody doesn't know. So they both lost their mothers at a pretty young age, and then they were a bit lost, really. And also quite a weird relationship with, each of them had a strange relationship with their father. Like Harry just now has come out and said in a story that I have open here on a tab, he said he no longer speaks to his father. So he's saying Charles won't speak to him. So he has this really like bizarre relationship with his dad, and that was similar with John Lennon, whose dad was like, he sort of left the family, and then he appeared on the scene again when John Lennon became famous. And he was a musician as well, actually, in a strange way. But yeah, and I think obviously when something like that happens to you, when your dad's like not really there, and then you lose your mother when you're young, you've got to have that's got to have a profound effect on
And then
particularly your relationship with women.
yeah,
And
and it's
sure enough, they both went with freaks.
yeah, like strong women that are very controlling. And I mean, Meghan Markle has dabbled in so many things, and not a lot of them are turning out. But she's very vocal and very inflammatory and all kinds of things. And you know, like I think Prince Harry and John Lennon were actually, you know, I guess maybe like what you're saying. Not that we want to do psychology, but they seem to be under the influence because maybe the loss of their mothers. But two greats. Well, I guess John Lennon, but Prince Harry seemed like a good young lad.
Well, Harry, you know, he maybe had potential to do something with his life, but I don't know. I just think he was too damaged, and you know, the title of his autobiography, "Spare," that kind of tells you everything. Because like his argument is that all of the attention was given to William because William was a direct heir to the throne. Like he was in line, and Harry was just going to be a spare. He was just kind of there in case William died or something like that.
I mean, that's a story throughout the ages, right? Through, you know, like all the, you know, like second in line and third in lines. Something. I mean, the Three Musketeers is a great story to that as well. There you go. Was that King Louis?
I think so. Isn't it King Louis the Louis the 16th? Is it? I can't remember.
Or the Man in the Iron Mask, that story where they substituted the one brother for the other brother. Let's move on to markets, though. And again, we talked about this a little while ago, that markets seem to have based. And there you go, another strong day for markets. And I think for the most part, the tariff stuff is starting to become less and less of a threat to the stock market for sure. And I did watch a couple of the interviews with Trump and, you know, like the 100-day thing. And, you know, like there's a lot of pressure on that administration to get past this tariff part. And so that, you know, like the economy and the markets can start to breathe. And I believe that we're starting to see some of that here in the stock market. So it is reacting more positive. Another up day here right now, currently up another 600 points. So like I said a while ago, fears where cowards go to die. And then when the stock market was down, it took courage to buy, right? Because according to these analysts and that was the end of the world. So there you go.
I think it's also a little bit to do with he's backed off with a US-made requirement on auto parts, hasn't he? So now, as long as it's compliant with CUSMA.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a bit here. Gold continuing to you know, to hang on to that $3,000 market. It looks like it's got a good firm grip on 3,000 right now too. Gold is that canary in the coal mine too, right? But it backed off, and if you look at the chart there, it hit that 3,500 mark, and then it's since backed off. Gold off right now a little bit. Again, as the stock market starts to move up, gold will actually fall a bit. Currently trading at 32.25, backed off quite a bit from that high of 3,500. In Canadian dollars, what are we looking at here in Canadian dollars? 44.49. Wow. I started buying gold in the the $250 range. So wow. Bitcoin. There you go. Bitcoin. We talked about that quite a while. We said that Bitcoin looked like it was basing in that $80,000 mark, and then it was going to look to challenge the $100,000 mark again. And there she is, banging on the door, knocking on the door, wanting to get back up into that $100,000 area. So there you go. If you're a Bitcoin believer. And I do believe that there is a lot of wind in the sails still for Bitcoin. It just has fallen into the, the back of the news because of all the tariff stuff has kind of like hogged all the headlines. So there you go. Canadian dollar looking for direction for sure. And it is looking for direction right now. And again, most of the strength that was shown in the Canadian dollar was the US dollar weakness due to those tariffs with China and Japan wielding the US T-bills as a way to say, well, you better watch what you're doing or you're going to weaken your dollar. But I think Trump actually wants a weaker dollar so that he can actually get some of that stuff. Another opinion piece from the National Post. Mark Carney's election win has economists worried. And that has to do with all the deficits that they plan to run. and says Canada already heading into a recession. And then Fitch, the ratings service, is warning that the deficit plan could harm credit ratings. There you go.
No surprises there?
No surprises there. So, and again, and we show this chart all the time. There's Canada ahead of Luxembourg.
Eat that, Luxembourg.
Eat that, yeah. I mean, I've talked to people in this local community, and I've talked to some of the car dealers. You know, sales are off like 40% in some places, in some of the dealerships, and some are even really bad. People are putting off large ticket items, and I've, you know, even a furniture store saying, you know, that not much is selling. So people are definitely scared, and also the economy is not good, and there's layoffs impending and all kinds of stuff. And then Peter MacKay put out this question. He put it out there. The reporters don't seem to want to ask the question, but Peter put it out there. MacKay, where's the pipeline? No mention.
Yeah, indeed. That's gonna. I guess he's got to be careful, doesn't he? The way that he discusses this subject, and he probably preferred not to discuss it at all. But you know, with tensions high in Alberta and Quebec, he's got to be very clever about it.
Yeah, you're right. This is from the Post too. The Canadian automobile parts exempted from Trump tariffs, and I think I mean, I heard him saying in the discussions last night, like, and it's hard to tell what's true and not true sometimes. I'm not saying that he's lying, and just saying sometimes I don't think he knows what he's saying, because he said a year or 2 years. I'm going to give him a year. I'm going to give him 2 years. I think he said that in the same breath. So a year or 2 years, I mean, that's a big difference, no? You're going to give him a year or 2 years to kind of figure this thing out. So I don't know, whatever that means, right?
I don't know if that's intentional on his part or if he just quite literally doesn't know. Like, it's weird, but it does seem like he wants to create disorder and chaos everywhere else in the world, and then sort of maintain the US as an attractive, stable place to do business. That seems to be, if he has a plan at all, it seems to be that.
Well, he is winning in this auto war for sure, like getting manufacturing back to the United States. I listened to Mary Barra, CEO of General Motors, talking about moving back production to the United States of America. And then here it is, GM Canada cut shifts at Oshawa Assembly Plant, cut one of the shifts, and Union called that move reckless. But again, if Canada doesn't drop that EV mandate, GM, Stellantis, Ford will all be leaving. I mean, that's just common sense. And if they have a guy like Stephen Gibault in there, I don't know if they'd ever drop that EV mandate. Like, you have to look at the punishment that's coming for them if they sell gas cars past a certain number, and that thing gets worse every year. So if you want an automobile sector in Canada, because the EV mandate is been removed in the United States of America.
I think a lot of it depends in terms of the auto industry and lots of other things. A lot of it depends on the 2028 presidential election, because if the American people repudiate Trumpism, and, you know, let's say it's J.D. Vance that runs for the Republicans, if he loses in a big way and the Democrats are back in, and it's somebody like Gavin Newsom, for example,
right now,
then that kind of kills it, doesn't it? And then maybe Canada will be okay. But it all depends on what happens there, because to move all your factories to somewhere like America, that takes a long time, doesn't it? It takes more than the Trump presidency will last, or longer than that'll last.
I would beg to differ with you. They're already talking about, Stellantis is talking about it already, and GM has said they're going to do it. It'll happen. Like, if they don't remove that EV mandate, and the likelihood right now that the DNC doesn't even have a leader that they can put forward. I think last night in that interview with Stephen A. was in there, and that Trump actually endorsed him to run for the Democratic leadership.
But I would say, like, look, about, what was it, about a year before the 2024 election, Trump looked finished. Yeah. He looked absolutely doomed, and the Republican Party looked like a joke and a mess. And he was on the verge of going to prison, Donald Trump, and he turned that around. I think it happens very fast. It happens really, really fast that a party comes back to life. And if that happened, I mean, do you really think that the Democrats would steer clear of an EV mandate? I think that they're going to go right in for that sort of thing again. In which case, a massive car company that's moved for that one reason and spent a huge amount of money to do that, they're going to be sat there thinking, like, what the hell have we just done? That was a waste of time.
Well, there you go. That's how you make your decisions, I guess. And that's how you can make your investment decisions and what have you there. I'm just saying right now there's no EV mandate in the United States, and there is one in here in Canada. And if you have excess capacity, and you think it's not a zero-sum game. If you have excess capacity here in the United States, and you can move that and still produce the same amount of vehicles, why wouldn't you move it?
Well, Carney said that any company that does that, he's going to, just now, but he's also said this before, he said he's going to punish those companies. And I mean, that's something for them to consider. If they're going to like totally abandon Canada, he might then try and like really harm those companies and try and move over to other manufacturers or something like that in terms of the access to the market.
Yeah, just a reminder, Canada produces 1.7% of the world's automobiles. So there you go.
Yeah, but it consumes tens of millions
it's about
every few years.
I think 1.8% of the consumption for sure, yeah. There you go.
Well, that's significant, isn't it? Especially for companies like Ford and like the North American car makers. That's not chump change. That's a big deal. That could be the difference between profit and loss.
Especially when they can't sell anything in China right now. There you go.
Yeah, and obviously the Europeans don't want to touch American cars because they think they're garbage and they've got better cars anyway. So like they have to play it clever. They can't. Canada is not. It maybe not as big a deal as Mark Carney seems to pretend it is, but it is still a pretty big deal in terms of as a market. Like it can, because these companies operate with such fine margins. If you alienate a market like Canada, 41.5 million people or whatever, that can be bad for your company in a pretty profound way.
Canadian retailer, and then we got a couple of really big Canadian retailers that are doing extremely well, Aritzia and Lululemon. Aritzia, though, yesterday reported stellar numbers, like Aritzia, huge numbers. Net revenues up 31%. This is a Canadian retailer, and they've expanded in the U.S., up 31%. Revenue in the United States up 48%. Wow, these are like huge numbers. Net revenue up 24%. E-commerce up 42%. Gross. Wow. Just stellar numbers. Net income increased to 311% to 99 million. Net income per share up 8 to 84 cents a share versus same period last year at 21 cents. Huge differences. Huge. Absolutely huge. And what do you think the stock did?
Increased, I would assume.
Increased dramatically. So this as of right now, the stock up 15.6% to up $7.75 this morning on that news. So there you go, Aritzia, Canadian retailer. And you know, when I was looking at that stock, because I've invested in Aritzia a while back, and I just walk into the store, and this is the way for people when they're looking to invest in stocks, just walk into the store and see who's buying. Like that store is full of people, and they leave with bags. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I don't understand what they see in it, but obviously women have their ways, don't they? They have their own guidance.
It doesn't really matter what you think, you know, because it's all it's all female clothing. But I go in there with my wife and my daughter, and I just sit there because I'm just waiting, and I'm just watching people, and people are just, their arms are full of clothing, and I'm just like, wow, that looks like the next Lululemon. And look at what Lululemon did. It was a small company founded by Chip Wilson in Vancouver there, and he actually had his mother sewing clothing. And I know one of the first ambassadors here was in Kelowna, was actually wearing the tights originally, and people were asking where she got them from. And again, Chip Wilson and Lululemon turned that into a multi-billion-dollar company. And then he got himself disgraced, and he's moved on. And I think he's founded Kit Nace now, that has not seen any kind of like shine like Lululemon has. Canadian Tire, the old Canadian Tire, is looking at some of the Hudson Bay's assets, those sources say. There you go. There's a lot of big assets.
Maybe they're going to make Hudson's Tire.
Hudson's Tire, there you go. Like, I mean, Hudson, it's such a shame. A 355-year-old department store's house hit the blocks after Hudson Bay filed for credit protection, right? It began liquidating the 80 Bay stores. There you go. And 16, it ran under Saks brand. So there you go, both of those brands. But there's got a lot of stuff that people are interested in. Canadian Tire also owns Sport Chek. Most people don't know that. Party City, Marks, and Pro Hockey Life. So there you go, Canadian Tire. The Canadian Tire is rolling along. How's that? How's that for a ever?
I don't understand how Canadian Tire turns a profit, but whatever. I often wonder about a lot of hardware stores like Home Depot. You go there and I don't know if it's just me, but there never seems to be many people in there. I don't really understand how it works, but they seem quite profitable.
Yeah, then we talked about this too. It's also, there's a BC mall owner, Wee Hong Lu, that was looking at, she wanted to make a pitch for some store. So there's a few people interested in buying some of the assets, but I mean, it has such legacy, right? So we'll have to see what actually turns out here. In our tech section, we got something here that it maybe have some colorful language, so plug your ears if you're sensitive, and maybe just plug your ears for a second. We're going to play this clip, though, and he talks about what AI is doing to the tech sector.
I think other than most computer science, like the highest level of computer science, almost all of the rest of coding is fucking useless now, right? I mean, you and I can go to ChatGPT and be like, I want to build an app that does this, this, and this, and give me the code, and it spits out the code. And then I've literally said, hey, by the way, I haven't coded since basic. What do I do with this? And it's like, oh, no problem. Go here, download this, open this Python thing, and then shove it in here, and then do this. And it just talks you through it. And now it'll be agentic, and an agent's going to do all that for you. You just don't need to fucking do it anymore. Would you send your kid to law school right now?
No, definitely not.
Oh, dude, we have fewer lawyers at our firm now than we did a year ago. It's just fucking great. And I can tell it, hey, you know what? Great job. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Hey, you know what? I forgot to tell you, we have all the leverage. Oh, in this case, actually do this. Hey, add this. Hey, write out the Exhibit A schedule of services, which usually takes a couple hours. And like, dude, it's just so fucking good. Would you teach your kid accounting, accounts receivable, accounts payable, like bookkeeping right now?
So what would you teach your kids?
Would you have your kids write marketing copy? Would you train them to write any news other than writing for the very top newspapers?
No, probably not.
Dude, go down the list of fucking skills, man.
So what's left?
Here's my grand theory. We are super fucked.
There you go. A very positive
He
guy.
seemed like he'd had a few whiskeys, didn't he?
He's a ranter. So there you go. We got the rant section there. There you go. Automotive. GM, we talked about that already in the marketing section. GM shuts down a shift in Oshawa. But Chinese automakers driving EV adoption. We talked about this many, many times on this show. The Chinese automakers are just huge. The auto show just happened in China too, and it's like I don't even know, like 8 times the size of the Detroit Auto Show. It's just massive, and many of those auto makers there in China are also making. They've copied the Tesla model. Again, you and I have talked about this many times. If we looked at Star Trek, the Chinese are basically the Ferengi, and they just copy everything. Tesla, is a energy company, a EV company, a robotics company, an AI company, and most of the EV makers in China are also that too. They're making robots, and they're making cars, and they're doing their own. I think one of them, BYD, it's called God's Eye. Instead of like Tesla has FSD, they call theirs God's Eye.
Blasphemous.
Apparently. But Brazil, they're selling cars in Brazil, selling them in Australia, Thailand, Mexico. Australia cut the EV import tariffs from 5% to 0 in 2022, and it just flooded the market with Chinese EV brands, BYD being the second most popular brand in Australia behind Tesla. Tesla and BYD, basically the big dogs in the park of the EV world, right? Those two are the massive ones, right? But Brazil has also been open to Chinese imports. So China may not get access to the Canadian and the United States market, but they're accessing the rest of the world. They're not getting access to the Indian market either, though, but Tesla just got access to that market. So there you go.
I could see if the Trumpism continues with the auto market, I could see a situation where we do end up getting them here. If the Americans succeed and they completely take away all of the auto manufacturing, then I guess
one of the
we
tricks
could use that, couldn't we?
One of the tricks that the Chinese have done in Europe is they'll buy a failing automaker, like Stellantis, say for example, buy Stellantis that has plants already in the United States, and then all of a sudden just start churning out Chinese EVs. Watch for that.
Yeah.
Watch for that.
I could see that happening. And the consumer will probably be quite happy about that at first anyway.
Yeah, I know, and Joe just said, she's a regular viewer here. Yeah, exactly, Joe. If you watch Star Trek and then the Ferengi, how they copy everything, I think the Chinese are basically the Ferengi. They invited Apple there. Apple, set up your shop here. And guess what was born out of that? Huawei. And we could go down the list, right, of all the technologies that the American companies took to China to get cheap labor. And what they got was competing companies that are actually undercutting them in price and features many times, right? There you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even military equipment has been stolen as well, hasn't it?
So we're at our meme section. If you're sensitive and if you're a big, if you're sensitive to political commentary and stuff like that, again, you should probably just sign off now so you don't, blow a gasket or lose your mind or whatever. So this one here, the first one I thought is a really good penalty to Canada, 4 years for elbowing. Elbows up.
I wonder if Carney is going to use that phrase again now that he's been elected. I have a feeling that he didn't really like doing that sort of thing.
I think we should play that cringe dance at the end of each show.
Yeah.
The one that we play.
I think in many ways his wife kind of steals the show. She's almost more cringy.
It actually, what was that? That's the chicken dance that you do at the weddings. That actually unseated the chicken dance is the most cringe dance. There you go. And the National Roast put out a piece there with.
Yeah, that's the Office meme.
There you go.
Very, very amusing picture of Trump there. It looks hilarious, doesn't he?
He's massive compared to Mark Carney there. And this one is, I think, goes along with what that guy was ranting about in AI. As AI calculates it'd be more efficient just to let humanity destroy itself rather than intervene, right? just let it happen, right? We're on a good path already. What's that?
No, I mean, it all depends on what kind of moral system or ethical system that we give it, doesn't it? If we make it like all about efficiency and economy and all the rest of it, then it probably will make that determination.
There you go. And this one is, there you go. This one is when you're driving, especially you're driving on Ottawa or Toronto or anything like one of the big U.S. cities. The guy waving his award after he gets gets to that off ramp 15 seconds ahead of you, right? Or gets to the front of the line there at the next stoplight.
Yeah, I feel like gets to the red light 15 seconds before you. That literally happened to me today when I was taking my kids to school. Somebody in a Tesla, obviously very excited to have the acceleration ability, just flew past, like went probably double the speed limit, just rocketed down the road. And then 15, 20 seconds later, I just sort of rolled up next to him at the red light. It's just like, congratulations, man.
You should pack some awards around with you and say, there you go. Here's your ribbon. Have a great day.
Yeah.
And then this one, I'm sure everybody, if you're on the internet, you've seen this one about the 100 gorilla, or the one gorilla takes on 100 men, and Tim Walz says he can do it, right? He's going to be the gorilla and wrestle the 100 men. Because remember, Tim Walz can actually beat you up, fix the truck, and then I don't know what else he can do. He can do something.
He can lose you an election.
I think, like, you know what? I was giving all that credit to the elbows up dance, saying it was super cringe. I think Tim Walz may own some of the most cringe moments I've seen in politicians.
He's absolutely appalling, isn't he? I mean, he was such a bad candidate. I think the Democrats,
who's doing
generally speaking, the Democrats have also come to acknowledge that as well, haven't they?
Who's doing the selection process? Like, I just don't get it. Like, how do you, like, I mean, if I was doing a job interview with that guy, I'd be saying, like, what are you here for? Like, what's going on? Like, I don't get it.
Jim, I'm just here to show you how great I am.
It's just like, yeah, I can fix a pickup truck and beat up some guys. I'm like, what? What are we talking about?
And apparently, I mean, not apparently, it's obvious. And I think they've even come out and said now, confirmed, that they got him in there because they knew that their numbers were bad with white men, that specific demographic. And sort of specifically within that demographic, sort of like masculine men as well, like ordinary men with ordinary sort of habits and attitudes and whatever. And they thought, all right, well, we're doing bad with them, but we're doing well with women. So let's bring in this fella, and he's Tim Walz. He's going to really appeal to all of these, like, you know, truck driving men. It's like steak eating truck driving men. But alas, they just thought he was ridiculous.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard to miss that part. We do sometimes viewers send us photos here, and so we're going to display one of them. And this is a beautiful photo that was sent us. And this is a beautiful Okanagan Lake here. Isn't that beautiful?
It's very tranquil, doesn't it? I'd love to have a dip in there.
And hiding underneath that surface, though, is the monstrous Ogopogo. That actually is the Loch Ness Monster. Again, that's the tie between the UK. Supposedly there's a tunnel between the two lakes that goes underground, I guess right down to the core of the earth. The Loch Ness Monster actually visits the two lakes. So there you go.
Puts on a Scottish accent when it gets to Scotland.
There you go. That's our show for this week. We do appreciate, especially the regulars that tune in all the time and the commenting. We do appreciate it. Yeah, and we hope that you subscribe, ring the bell, share it with your friends if you like it. Yeah, it would be nice. We also have the newsletter, and obviously a lot of the stories we talk about are on clonernow.com as well. But we do thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.